morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this pale blue dot that we all live on. My name is Adam-Antium, you are the audience, and you're listening to AAUTZM Podcast. I'd like to thank you all from the bottom of my being for tuning in, or clicking in as it were, to this podcast. Very much appreciated. Just the usual announcement for those of you listening to this on YouTube right now. My podcasts also exist on talkshoe.com. Down below in the video description you'll find a link to the course series, so there you can download and listen to the full MP3s for free. So for those of you who want to do that, you can do that there. There's also, I've been thinking about doing my first live episode, which is, something that I've never really done with this podcast specifically. But I am thinking about maybe trying for a live episode for the December episode of this show. So in about 3 months' time, hopefully, I'll have a live show sort of planned. I'm thinking, because I know that I can host live podcasts on TalkShoe itself. But I was thinking maybe having it as a Google Hangout where people can actually come in and they can, add their little thing if they want. So, it's sort of like a group exchange sort of thing. And then I put put it up on YouTube and the audio up on TalkShoe after I've finished editing it. So, I've been thinking about doing that for the December edition, so December 5th this year. Or I might just sort of push it back towards maybe closer towards the end of the year. Maybe because recently, in recent years, I've been doing like reviews of the year and then of like world news and then a preview of the next year. Maybe this year we should do something different and just sort of have a group discussion, as it were, and just really try and hammer home some of these points that we need to get out and communicate to people. But that's that. On for the usual plug. For those of you who want to know exactly what the Zeitgeist Movement actually is and what it advocates, there's a book called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined. If you go to www.thezeitgeistmovement.com/orientation, you can find exactly how to get hold of it. If you want a paper copy, then you can buy one from Amazon or Lulu.com. But there's also on that very page itself a way to download the PDF of it for free, so you can put that on your Kindle or whatever devices you want to read from. But yeah, that's really the canonical text, as it were, of a series of essays that describe from front to back to forward, whatever, exactly what the Zeitgeist Movement advocates, what the train of thought actually is. Because really, the Zeitgeist Movement itself, it's just a word, just a phrase, as it were. It's just a construct. What's really important is actually the train of thought, because it's the train of thought that we're aligned with, or trying to be aligned with as much as humanly possible, then instead of being loyal to an organisation, because organisations change, because the people within them change, and the things that they do within them change. But yeah, it's the train of thought explained. But anyway, there's that. But it is my unfortunate task to inform you that the Dark Age calendar is now no longer our sponsor, thanks to the quick and witted actions of the bald Caucasian man, if you remember him, the identity of whom has now been revealed to me. So, cheers, Ben. But for personal reasons, Ben has requested that I don't publicly divulge the details of exactly what transpired between him and the Dark Age calendar. But by all means, flood his inbox if you so desire. So, this podcast is brought to you by Cutting Room Floor Studios, a company that specialises in helping you edit together your own fake beheading video. The conspiracy theories and the conspiracy nuts were right all along. Okay, it's all staged. And if you're going to do it right. Besides, only the conspiracy nuts and those who no one actually listens to actually watches the video itself. So you can have an ignorant public getting up in arms about a hoax they haven't even witnessed. Just think of all the mayhem you could create, all because culture hates verification of data and prefers to go for knee-jerk emotional reactions, thus ensuring the cycle of violence over and over and over. Now, remember, if you order before September 11th, that's 6 days from this podcast's upload date, you can get a lifetime membership for all your video editing needs. So, visit www.thisisclearlyfictional.com/offer, enter the code name AAUTZM and get your membership. Do it. Do it now. Right now. Pause this podcast and do it. Anyway, welcome back. This podcast is also brought to you by Russell Brand. Yep, that is true. He actually does sponsor this podcast now. Yeah, he sends me envelopes of cash in wet plastic bags through the letterbox, which, I have to take the notes and dry them on the radiator, but, why should I complain? All right? Why bite the hand that feeds? Okay? He's agreed to co-fund this podcast until he can spare at least 10 minutes on this show with me to talk about science and sustainability. So, cheers, Russell. Anyway, on with other announcements. The reason why this podcast is a film review as opposed to like an actual well thought out and structured podcast is because I'm really getting on busy with the next film that I'm going to be making, the short film that's concluding the trilogy of short films that I've been doing. It's called Chapter 3 Threshold, and I'm just having to get little bits and pieces. All the parts have been cast. Everything's sort of more or less in the bag. It's just a matter of getting to the crescendo point of pre-production, and then I'm going to be starting production within a week or two. Hopefully, I'm going to have it finished by the end of October. By the end of this month, because I've got to compose music for it. I'm collaborating on a title track, as it were, which I still haven't composed yet, but I need to get on with that. But yeah, that's going to be coming towards the end of September. If you go to www.youtube.com/AAUTZM, that's my YouTube channel, and there's the existing two chapters that were already there in a playlist. So that's that. Just one more announcement before I go into the topic of the show, which I know some of you are itching to hear about. Is that I'm planning on doing a radio play in the near future. Once I've got the film done, and I've got my new music project sort of up and running, and on its own two legs, as it were, I'm going to be writing a radio play. A tentative title for it right now is called "Losing My Religion," and it's essentially a radio play about someone who goes from sort of staunch capitalist to science and sustainability advocate. So, that's something that's going to be very interesting to see. And if you're interested in maybe playing a part in this radio play, by all means, get in touch. I'm going to be doing a recruitment drive soon. So, but anyway, there's that. Okay. The topic that I'm going to be covering today, or rather the film I'm going to be reviewing this episode, is called Return to Oz, which was released in 1985. Just a spoiler disclaimer, I am going to be discussing this whole entire film, all the relevant details, so it will contain spoilers. So if you haven't watched this film yet, it's called Return to Oz. If you haven't watched it yet, by all means, and you don't like spoilers, by all means, put this podcast to one side, watch it first, and then we can get into this. Otherwise, carry on listening. So, one of the titles I had, because it was this film. This was the first film that I actually wanted to review for this show. So I'm very excited to bring you this. I actually gave a little title to myself for this, because I mean, this could actually be a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm presenting it to you in spoken word format. But the title I got for it is Departure or Delusion. Now, if you've watched the film, then you'll know that that this is perhaps a question you're asking yourself about the events of the film. But we will get into that after we've gone through. I'm basically just going to go through the whole film, just sort of explaining the little details and giving my sort of like little commentary. Now, the fact that this is a Disney film is irrelevant, okay? I like this movie. I mean, Tron Legacy is a Disney movie, and I love that film, even though the storyline kind of sucks. It's kind of generic, where it's like evil bad guy mounting an army to take over the world. Hero's got to stop him, you know. But yeah, I like this movie, and here's why. Now, it's set in the year 1898. All right, electricity is relatively new. All right, so the film itself, it's set 6 months following the tornado that nearly destroyed the house, and Dorothy is still suffering from insomnia and a lingering obsession with Oz. You know, she'd just wake up. She'd just lay in bed, just awake, until, you know, just staring out at the sky, trying to find a message from Oz. You know, she couldn't let go, even after 6 months. And Dorothy's Aunt May and Uncle Henry, I think it is, they're getting quite concerned about her, because they're convinced that Oz doesn't exist, and this is, as I said, this is something we can discuss later on. But they're really concerned about us, so they've sent an advert in the paper, advertising a brand new remedy provided by medical science. And the thing is, because this is, this is early 19th century America, so of course no socialised healthcare, so they have to pay for it. But because they're struggling enough as it is, they don't have the money themselves, and there's some reference to one of Aunt May's sisters who will lend them the money, but Uncle Henry just cannot stand the idea. He calls it charity, because obviously he's a very proud man. He doesn't want anything that he hasn't earned. But that in of itself, this, it's something that that English people such as myself, we sort of take our NHS for granted. We think that we will always have healthcare that we don't necessarily have to pay for. There are specialised things that going private, as it's known, that we do have to pay for. But the vast majority of the healthcare in this country is provided completely free of charge. We pay through our taxes, apparently. But no, back then they had to cough up the cash, or you don't get the treatment. And this is obviously a strain on all of them, because Uncle Henry still thinks that his leg is injured, because he's just feeling sorry for himself after getting his leg injured in the tornado. But no, as I said, Dorothy is convinced that she actually went to Oz, but she fails to provide any evidence when she's asked. There's a key that Bellina, the hen, sort of like enables Dorothy to find, and the head of the key is like a circular key with a line with like a bar through it. Kind of like the red part of a no smoking sign. That's what the head of the key looked like, and Dorothy said, "Oh, there's an O and a Z. That's Oz. This is a message from Oz. It arrived on a shooting star," because the night before she saw a shooting star. but yeah, the Dorothy's Aunt May, she says that that's the key from the old house. Now, that could actually be true, but I mean, as we find out later on, the key actually does work in another lock in Oz, which is strange. So, is this a coincidence? I don't know. But as Dorothy leaves for the doctor in a pony and trap, Toto manages to chase them down, and Dorothy, just instructs him to go home. So he just sits there howling after her. I mean, this is something that they'd already gone a bit of a distance, and then Toto chases out after them, and actually wants to sort of go with her. So, does Toto know something? I mean, more about Toto's motives towards the end of this review. But anyway, they get to the clinic, as it were, and the doctor that they meet with, played by Nicol Williamson, fantastic actor. He also played the Merlin in John Boorman's Excalibur, the 1981 film. So that was 4 years before this. But yeah, he's noticed that he's got a ruby pinky ring. Yeah, his pinky ring has a ruby stone in it. Very important. But anyway, Dorothy explains about her experiences of Oz, but then again, when asked about the ruby slippers, where are the ruby slippers? She's like, they fell off. So she can't provide any evidence again. So the doctor prescribes electroconvulsive therapy. Yeah, electroshock treatment, as it's also known. Now, back in 1898, this sort of thing was relatively new. I mean, electricity itself is relatively new. And, but in an attempt to comfort Dorothy, the Dr. Worley, puts, because his name is Dr. J.B. Worley. Now, I'm not sure whether this is an anagram or anything or whatever. But yeah, he sort of points out, dials and parts on the front of the electroconvulsive therapy machine, saying, "Oh, look, this is his face. Those are his eyes. That's his nose, and that's his mouth." But this is, this film contains a lot of self-reference. This is one thing that you will hear a lot when I'm going through this, about how the film refers to possibly the world, the Land of Oz, and the Land of Oz may be referring to what's known as the real world. But more on that later on. But then we then meet, adorned in a rather unsettling black uniform, the head nurse, as she's known, escorts her to a room 31 to be exact, remember that for later on, to await therapy. But there she is visited, as it were, by a young blonde girl who we later identify as Ozma, who brings her a jack-o'-lantern. Remember a jack-o'-lantern? It's made out of a pumpkin. In anticipation of Halloween, because she says that Halloween's coming up soon. They don't speak for long, since she has to promptly leave, as moans are heard elsewhere in the hospital. Now, the sound of these moans is very similar to some moans that you hear later on in the film, but we will get to that when we get to it. But yeah, a thunderstorm approaches, as does the sound of squeaking wheels down the corridor towards her room, as the head nurse and the orderlies, whose uniforms actually resemble, it's like a fusion of a lab coat and a straitjacket, right? It's a strange costume. But they take Dorothy to go get shocked, basically. But just as the shock is about to be administered, the hospital suffers a power cut. Right? And we find out later that it's actually the building itself was struck by lightning. Obviously, presumably due to the storm. But heck, who knows, right? I mean, this is a Disney film about magic. But yeah, Dorothy manages to escape the hospital with the help of Ozma, who by now has clearly infiltrated the hospital to ensure Dorothy's freedom. But it's also clear that, Ozma seems to be on some grander mission that we are just not privy to. However, she appears to drown in the river during the escape, despite finding Dorothy a chicken coop to float away in. Now, the following shot is rather strange because she basically drifts away in a chicken coop on a river, right? And then the next shot, you see her seemingly in the middle of the ocean. Now, it's highly unlikely that Dorothy could have floated towards the sea because essentially the state of Kansas is more or less slap bang in the centre of the US. But what really happens is, what seems to happen is that because it's raining so hard, it floods, and then the waters recede again, and where Dorothy is, she ends up in Oz. So she awakes and realises that Bellina, the hen from the farm from earlier, not only is in the coop with her, but can also communicate verbally with her. So presumably, since Oz somehow bestows all animals with the ability to talk. But yeah, she wakes up in the middle of the deadly desert. Now, this is a strange phenomenon. It's essentially an area of desert land that, if any living thing were to encroach upon it, then that living thing would turn instantly to sand. It's kind of like the bog of eternal stench from Labyrinth. If you set one toe in the bog of eternal stench, you'll smell bad for the rest of your life. That's essentially the premise with that. But with the deadly desert is similar in the sense that if you stick your toe in the sand, then you will turn to sand. Which is strange considering what kind of part the deadly desert actually plays in the Oz ecosystem. Because essentially, because it's a desert itself, it's an environment that adapts life to its needs. How a desert biosphere would actually function itself, I have no idea. But it's an interesting idea considering this, like I said earlier, this is a Disney film involving magic, so it doesn't get any easier to logically defend. Okay, but anyway, one of the things we also find is that rocks originally appear to sort of have faces in them, when in fact later on we find that they're actually gnomes because the Oz has been invaded by the Gnome King. But yeah, the thing is though, is I'm not sure, because I've had to do a little bit of research for this podcast, so I couldn't do as much as I wanted to. But I'm not sure whether gnomes are generally classed as living beings, because there are a couple of stepping stones that Dorothy has to walk on to get out of the deadly desert, because there's a line of stepping stones between the chicken coop and the normal ground, as it were. But yeah, some of those have like the faces in them, and it got me to thinking that maybe gnomes are some kind of geological creature, in the sense that they are instead of being more of an organic life form, they're an organism that is composed of what stone is. And are they alive or not? I'm not sure. But if they can actually just sit in the sand of the deadly desert and not turn to sand, then either they're immune from the effects of the deadly desert, or that's maybe a factual error in the film itself, since the deadly desert is supposed to turn living things to sand. And I would say that in some way, maybe, the gnomes are living because they have, motives of their own. They communicate. They're sentient, whatever. But anyway, but it's strange how the gnomes, considering that that stone also comprises the walls of the Emerald City. We see gnomes being able to travel through the stone structures themselves and their faces sort of like move along as they sort of go. And it's like a strange relationship between a sort of entity of some type and the physical matter of stone that it's moving through. But that itself, it gives the sort of motif of supervision, sort of like CCTV. But imagine, instead of having fixed CCTV cameras that are like that have like a particular fixture that they're on and a particular gaze that they're going, imagine if CCTV's cameras could move around as they wished. That's the kind of surveillance society that Oz operates under now. But yeah, Dorothy also finds the old house which crushed the Wicked Witch to the east, and discovers that Yellow Brick Road is severely damaged from what looks like seismic activity. So right here, I mean, you can tell that there's something wrong with Oz itself. That something terrible has happened in the 6 months since the tornado. And I suppose this is it is symbolic, I guess, in a sense, of how Dorothy feels about her life. She feels that she wants Oz, she wants to be back in Oz so much, but she's held back by the ruin of her real life. Not necessarily being able to prove that she went to Oz, not being able to go back, but now she has, and something's gone wrong. So, she runs to the Emerald City to try and find out. But when she reaches the Emerald City, she finds the residents, including the Tin Man and the Lion, have been petrified. And, petrified means turned to stone, not terrified, but petrified. They are also greeted by Oz's answer to a twisted punk biker gang. They're known as the Wheelers. Okay, they're a group of mentally ill men, clearly, with extended arms and wheels instead of hands and feet, which creak with alarming regularity. But while hiding from the Wheelers, Dorothy discovers Tick-Tock, a soldier of the Royal Army of Oz. Now, this is something that this is possibly something that was referred to earlier. But the Royal Army of Oz is really just comprised of this one machine. And he's a clockwork machine with 3 functions that constantly need winding up at regular intervals. There's his thinking, his speech, and his action. Right? Excuse me. Now, isn't that interesting that that thinking, speech, and action, they're really the 3 main facets of human communication itself.